Hey, teacher, leave those kids alone. What is up, guys? Welcome back to some of my spooky season throwback reviews, and today we're talking about one of my all-time favorite millennial sci-fi horror films, The Faculty. The Faculty came out in 1998, just 2 years or so after Kevin Williamson became the big name, the big screenwriter in Hollywood with the massive success of Scream, and then followed it up with things like I Know What You Did Last Summer and this and a few others. And this is a movie that was on my radar. Didn't get a chance to check it out in theaters, but I remember very distinctly going to the video store. It's one of those times when my mom was around, and I was going to be staying at her apartment with her, but she was going to be having some friends over. So she was trying to find some things for me to be able to do to occupy myself, a couple of video games, a couple of movies to hang off on one side of the apartment while she hung out with everybody else. And I remember distinctly renting this as well as John Carpenter's Vampires in the same night. Holy shit, what a double feature. And ever since that night back in 1998, this has maintained a film that I have rewatched constantly. It has always been one of my favorites, and it's always been one of the main films that I've always been puzzled at why this was not a bigger hit, especially given the big name that Kevin Williamson was at the time, the fact that even just the marketing of the film was very classic to the late 90s, where it's, let's just invite some kind of a horror scenario and put a bunch of really pretty looking people on the poster. For whatever reason, that marketing campaign, that concept didn't really land with The Faculty. It still made a decent amount of money, but it didn't become this massive hit like the Scream franchise, which to this day, everybody involved with this film will tell you was a really disappointing upset for them. They really thought this was a surefire hit, but The Faculty has maintained becoming this huge cult classic that, despite not having the recognition of something like the Scream name, has always been this film that us horror fans that grew up with it have championed and have kept its name alive all these years later. And something else that's also very distinct for The Faculty to me, and I think a lot of us have at least one or two memories like this that'll get unlocked once in a while. This is a movie that I distinctly remember the experience of watching my VHS tape of The Faculty, to where every time I rewatch the film, whether it was on DVD or Blu-ray or now 4K, there's a part of me that wants that VHS tape back, because there was something wrong with the way that we recorded it, and the intro of the film with the offsprings, the kids aren't all right, kind of doubled itself. So like the first 10 seconds of the movie would play, and then the tape would like do this little static thing and then restart the movie. And then about 3/4 of the way through the film, when they go to the football game where you have Principal Drake and Miss Olsen in the stands, and they notice our main characters are on the scene, and slowly she starts to walk down the bleachers while looking at them, the tape would stutter again, and it did this weird little like remix effect on the Another Brick in the Wall soundtrack that was playing at the time. And every time I rewatch this film, mentally I keep waiting for that little weird VHS digital glitch to happen, and it never does. And in my head canon, that's just a part of the movie that I can never recreate. Am I alone? I know some of us have some of those memories, right? A commercial or something that we've included in the VHS tape back in the day that's just a part of our experience of the movie that we can never recreate again, and it always feels like something's missing. And the movie is essentially the Kevin Williamson modern, at least for the 90s, meta take on Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Thing. You have an alien invasion happening at this little podunk high school in the middle of Ohio, where the teachers, the faculty, the title of the film, is slowly being taken over by this alien creature that's like a parasite. And the only people that know that this invasion is happening and is trying to combat it are a group of the students that nobody will listen to. Starting off with the positives for The Faculty, one of the things that always has made this movie stand out for me is the cast of characters. Not only do I just enjoy basically all of the actors in this film, and a number of them went on to do much bigger and even more recognizable things, especially Elijah Wood, but I love the way that the characters in this film are written and presented, because for a high school horror film, they really do try to capture all of the cliche classic caricatures of high school personalities and the high school social constructs. You've got Zeke, who's like the rough around the edges bad boy who's been held back a year. You've got Stan, who's the head quarterback, the captain of the football team, jock stereotype, who sucks at his academics. You've got Delilah, who's the bitchy head cheerleader, who's totally like completely fixated on the way that she looks and doesn't really care who she steps on. You've got Casey, who's the nerdy kid with the heart, who's the one who's bullied, the photographer for the newspaper. You got Mary Beth, who's like the innocent virgin girl who's brought in. Like, they pretty much cover all bases on all the tired tropes of high school characters. But what the faculty does that all those other films don't is that throughout the film, they really start to subvert how those characters actually are. You have the rough around the edges guy who looks like a dumbass who's never going to get out of high school, who's actually kind of scientifically genius in his off times. And you have the jock who wants to give up being a football player to focus on his academics and have something a little bit more of personal worth for him. You've got Casey, who is the unassuming nerd who kind of rises up to be the hero. And so they take these caricatures and these cliches and they slowly subvert them throughout the film and bring you a really well-rounded and dynamic cast of characters that stand out as being so different among all the other plethora of high school horror films. And one of the things that really helps you to endear yourself to all these different characters, no matter how cool or how bitchy or how unlikable they might seem in the first reels of the film, is the really snappy dialogue written by Kevin Williamson. As I said earlier, he was kind of the top dog as far as horror screenwriting during this era, made most famous by his work in Scream, but all of his other films kind of carried through his style in ways where you could always kind of spot a Kevin Williamson script. And I honestly think this is my favorite of his scripts, of his screenplays, because I really like how rough around the edges the characters are. Like, they're very hard R with the way that they talk, which might seem a little over the top to adults, but I promise you that's how kids talk in high school. Like, you know, that whole joke about, I remember my first beer. Well, I remember my first cuss word, and that's what it was like. You just cussed way too much. And so I enjoy all of that, as well as that classic Williamson nature of bringing some kind of a meta angle into here. So instead of it being a slasher film that's knowledgeable on all the slasher tropes, this is a sci-fi alien invasion horror film that's knowledgeable on all of those stories. So you get references to all these literary works like The Puppet Masters, and then you have movie references like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Independence Day. And it's not quite as overt into the meta style as the Scream series was, but there's enough there where you get that key element of Williamson's writing that I think maintains this fun nature. You know, you have these characters that are aware enough of the fictional versions of the scenario that they're stuck in, and they're kind of dissecting the similarities to what they're experiencing as characters and what they've seen in other stories, and the movie taking times to kind of subvert those expectations and saying, well, this is how it went in the novel, but guess what? The shit's going to go backwards in our movie. And so it's able to be a film that very much fits into this little subgenre, this category of sci-fi alien invasion films, but has so much that's different about it that it stands out as something that was really fresh and modern at the time of its release.
Maybe the X-Files is right. And where do all these movies come from anyway? How do we know Spielberg, Lucas, Sonnenfeld, Emmerich haven't been visited by aliens?
I also think that this is one of the better films at actually making high school an actual setting and an actual integral piece to the film. So often when you have these high school horror films, it really just means it's a horror film that focuses on teenagers. Very rarely do you spend a lot of time at the actual school, or the experience of going to high school is a big integral piece to the actual film or the character arcs. And The Faculty is different in that way, where the faculty being the title and the faculty quite literally being the main villain, the antagonistic source of the scares and the evil and the dread throughout most of the film, it really does focus on high school being the entire setting of all the different action and horror and thrilling sequences that we get in the film. There's only like one segment of the movie where we get to go off to Zeke's house for a little side adventure, and then we go right back to the football game. So aside from a couple of little character establishing moments with some parents, it's pretty much all focused and all set inside of this high school. And the way that entire setting and the way that entire like mindset of being a high school student is written into the film, I think also just really gives this movie a really fun identity, where you have this story that on its surface is about this alien parasite that is slowly kind of seeping its way through this Ohio town, through this high school as like the patient zero place, you know, ground zero, I should say. And it also has kind of this underlying social commentary inside of it, almost like an allegory of losing your individuality to conform to the masses. And that's even tied in with how the alien queen, the eventual reveal of the main villain of the film, like that the alien queen's pitch to our remaining human characters, like, I'll give you a world without fear. I'll give you a world without the bullying and without all of these different things that make you afraid and make you feel anxious to go through your everyday life. The new girl can fit in. The nerdy guy can be captain of the football team. Like, it's wonderful over here. And it's such a cool, clever way to kind of dissect the typical anxiety people have with these social constructs and these cliques inside of high school, and where a lot of us kind of want to be the accepted ones. We want to be in the popular crowd. We want to be the one that doesn't have to be afraid to be themselves. But in order to do that, a lot of times you have to lose what makes you an individual. And if you're one of those people who are mentally strong enough to make it through the trials and tribulations of high school, almost without exception, your adult life is so much more rewarding because you stayed you. You stayed who you are rather than change who you are or lose who you are to be accepted by people that really don't give a fuck about you. So on its surface, it's a movie about teenagers versus this alien threat, when in reality, the actual story being told is about literal teenage alienation. And they do a great job at finding these very reasonable justifications in the plot for why so much of this happens at school. Like parents not wanting to hear from their teenager about aliens are taking over my school when they just look like a nut. They look like somebody who is calling out for attention or somebody who might be hiding drug use.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
Dad, they're here.
Even having things like the football game in the third act where all the people in town are going to be centrally located. This is going to be now the big source event for this thing spreading outside of our little Ohio town if we don't stop it here. And it's a fantastic setting for a really explosive third act because you get things happening on the football field and that badass football game where the kind of shitty football team suddenly are just knocking people's heads off because they got like this alien lack of humanity in them. And you got the scene inside of the buses, which is really nice and tense, and them closing off the gym as kind of their safe house while they're doing all of this. It's just a really cool movie in the way that they take the high school setting and find so many different ways to make those the central set pieces of the movie. And one other thing about the writing of this film that I've always appreciated, which is a really fine line to walk, is that I think the faculty does a perfect job at taking some very heavy inspirations from other stories and other iconic films without ever feeling like it's ripping them off. Most of you guys watching my channel know that John Carpenter's The Thing is my favorite horror film of all time. And so inherently, I would be the one, if anybody, to be extremely defensive if I saw another film taking so many elements of John Carpenter's The Thing and using it in a way that felt like a ripoff. And it kind of stands to reason why I enjoy The Faculty so much in the way that they did it, and it's maintained one of my favorites, because this is kind of like a high school version of The Thing without ever feeling like it's just blatantly taking things and not doing its own modern twist on them. This is like a mix of Body Snatchers and The Thing at its heart, where you have that paranoia of who is the alien, who is still human among us. You have even their own version of the blood test scene with this little drug, this scat stuff that Zeke makes, where when he finds out that this is what actually hurts the aliens because it dries them out and they're sensitive to dehydration, they all have to sniff this drug in the same way that McCready makes everybody takes this little blood test and sticks a hot needle in it. And even elements of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where you never really know who is a pod person. And if you walk up and treat somebody as human who's actually an alien, they can alert everybody else to your presence and you can be absolutely fucked. Like there's a whole section of that where Stan goes out to try to see if the football team or if Coach has been turned human after they thought that Principal Drake was the queen that they just took out. So a movie that, for me, takes a lot of classic elements to these very celebrated movies within this subgenre, but finds a way to do its own thing with it to where it never really feels like this blatant copy to me. I love the way that they do their own spin on them.
I leave for 5 minutes, I come back and everyone's a fucking alien. If I have to Men in Black your ass, you're gonna fucking sniff it.
Happy now.
I also think The Faculty holds up really well with its special effects. Now, this is Robert Rodriguez continuing to collaborate with KNB Effects. They're the ones that really got their first major shot with From Dusk Till Dawn, which I think had some mixed results. There was a lot of ambition in that film, and some of it ends up looking a little bit silly as the movie has gone on, but still one of my all-time favorites, honestly. But this film, I think they have a really nice balance of having these really cool practical effects for especially the alien queen and some of the ways that they're visualizing the actual parasitic little worm that they're having go around, and some of the gore effects in the film, and of course like explosions and shit. It's a very action-packed sci-fi horror film, but also having some early CGI mixed in. And I think what they do so well is they find ways to utilize that very early kind of primitive version of CG without ever overdoing it, without ever having a sequence that is just so overblown with it that by the time the film's in theaters, that CGI effect already looks dated. You have certain shots, you have certain moments, and certain little transitions from practical to CGI that are very obvious if you watch them, but it never lingers on them too long where it takes you out of the film, or it like makes you linger on how much of an uncanny valley you're having with whatever they're trying to show you and trying to convince you is real in that moment. Even having something like Miss Burke's head walking around with these little tentacles, very clearly a CGI effect, but with the tone of the movie and the inherent non-serious nature of what is going on, to me, it holds up so much better than even some films that I've seen within the last couple of years with modern CGI. And I genuinely think their ultimate creature design for the big bad of the movie, the final boss, the alien queen, is one of the coolest designs for an alien creature of all time. I find it to be massively underappreciated. I actually just did a tier list a couple of weeks ago ranking a bunch of different monsters and creature designs, so check that out up here if you're interested. But the Alien Queen and Faculty was very high on that list. And beyond their creature design and their special effects, I think there's some genuinely great cinematography in this movie. There are some complete iconic shots to me all throughout the film. Like, a lot of them are surrounding Robert Patrick's character. I always thought he was the coolest of the Faculty villains here, and I'll get a little bit more into that later. But you have shots where he's at the football game and he's got his arms crossed and he's got like this evil little grin while fireworks and shit are going off. Like, him and his alien football team are just slowly massacring this other county's team and turning them all into aliens. He's just got this fucked up grin. It's really cool. I love, of course, the reveal of the alien queen and the bleachers. There's a great sequence in here that I think is just visually very cool, but also is saying a lot under the surface in the third act, where you have the character that reveals themselves to be the alien queen, and they're walking through the locker room naked and has this very like almost femme fatale seductress type tone to her, while shadows are kind of being cast on the walls of alien tentacles and this more alien being. And it's kind of this weird storytelling device in a way where she's trying to lure Casey in and trying to draw him into this perfect world and give yourself over to me, and has that very seductress tone to her with this promise of this amazing world. All the while, the lighting and the shadows are showing like the true nature of what is actually going on. Oh, this movie's so fucking underappreciated, goddammit. And my final positive, which is honestly one of my favorite and one of the most iconic pieces of this movie experience to me, is the soundtrack. Now, I do love the composer work in this film, the actual score. This was done by Marco Beltrami, and he's done a lot of movies in the 90s with the Kevin Williamson. Like, he did the score for, I believe, the first 2 Scream films, maybe even more than that, but did a lot of work with some of the people who were involved with this film. And it has a lot of reminiscence to me of some of the score working From Dusk Till Dawn, even though it's not the same composer, where it has this very much like Evil Rising type of vibe to it. Like the sequence where you get Mr. Furlong and he's attacking the kids, and you get that great iconic shot of him with of Zeke taking him out with the paper cutter and the little tentacles coming out of his fingers. The score in that moment is badass. The score in the third act with the alien queen is incredible. But even more so than the music that was composed for the film, the soundtrack, the collection of popular music is amazing. I feel like movie soundtracks are kind of like a lost appreciation. Like, there was so many that were so iconic in the 90s and the early 2000s that you would seek out the actual CD for, whether it was this, From Dusk Till Dawn, Bride of Chucky, Freddy vs. Jason. I had the CD for all of them, but this is one of my all-time favorites. Whether you have Class of 99, I think I might have even called him Class of 98 earlier by mistake, but Class of 99, which was like this little side project that Lane Staley, the singer, God rest his soul, from Alice in Chains did, and his iteration of Another Brick in the Wall, which is probably my favorite iteration of that song. Or you have Creed's take on the classic Alice Cooper song, I'm 18. You've got The Kids Aren't All Right from The Offspring that opens up this movie in this epic fashion. I love the soundtrack to this movie to the point where I paid an obscene amount of money for an out-of-print vinyl record of the soundtrack. This is one of my more prized possessions in this little vinyl collection over here. Just an awesome collection of music, and I even love the way that the actual album is put together. And this is just something that it's like a lost art for me. We used to have CDs, and now I'm kind of rediscovering it with vinyl. But this, along with maybe the From Dusk Till Dawn soundtrack, both Robert Rodriguez movies, oddly enough, are two of my most prized vinyl soundtrack possessions. So if you're a fan of late 90s alt rock and punk rock and all those good stuff in between, grunge rock, this is one of the best movie soundtracks of that era. Moving on to the mixed elements, the only thing that I've ever really been kind of unsure on how I feel about it is the very end of the film. Like after the climax, after the evil has been vanquished and things are getting back to normal, I love seeing where all the characters end up, where they all kind of get their own versions of a happy ending, and we kind of fully have that evolution of starting with a certain caricature and evolving them into something almost opposite of where they started. Love all of that. But the plausibility about how the world treats the events surrounding this film is kind of a little off to me. Now, inherently, this is a movie that's very non-serious. While it definitely has tension, it does have a grounded bit of grit to it. It's a very over-the-top and fantastical type of story. So it's not like an inherent negative. It's why I threw it in the mix. But you have teachers that literally died. The principal melted. Some other characters that definitely should have been dead, but they show back up like in the end credits montage, like Mr. Furlong or whatever. But you have a lot of fucking death and a lot of weird shit. You have parents, you have kids from other districts that was just at this football game that turned into these like alien zombies and then have fucking worms shoot out of their ear after the evil is vanquished. The fact that this just becomes like this little weird conspiracy theory that local news reporters are kind of sticking at, and they even have a full-on shot of the school newspaper and Delilah posting a story about everything that if you pause and zoom in on what's actually written, it's fucking hilarious, by the way. It's one of the few moments of the movie that almost leans a little too far into the non-serious camp direction. Now, I don't necessarily have a pitch for what would have been the better final reel of the film. It still maintains that fun tone, and maybe that's what they were trying to preserve there, but there was just something about like as wild of as a potential earth-ending, humanity-ending event that this movie was, the fact that we end on that note, like, it's whatever. It's just kind of like this weird rumor that a couple of students talked about. I don't know. That hasn't ever 100% worked for me. And now moving on to the negatives. And I got to be honest with you, I don't really have much here. Like, this is honestly me just trying to think of something to say that maybe could have been a little bit better, as with my mixed. Like, this is one of my all-time favorite films. It's one that I don't really have much of a negative experience at all when I'm watching it. But two things that I think could have made it a little better. One is, I'm honestly just bringing it up just for the hilarity of it. I think that there's an odd note in the climax of the film where you have Zeke, who has now become one of the new football players, I guess trying to take his high school career seriously after the events of the film. And you have a shot where Famke Janssen's character of Miss Burke, who, when she's a human, is like this very shy, kind of nerdy teacher and was like this very, lustful seductress when she was an actual alien, as you would expect a Famke Janssen character to be most times. There's a shot where she's watching Zeke play football and he kind of smiles at her and she's like, gives like this little creepy, like, I'm watching you type face. Okay. Logically, Zeke is like 19 years old, maybe even on his way to 20. He's been held back. Like, okay. And she was probably in her mid 20s at the time. Like, it's not that ridiculous legally, but there's something weird about that. There's something weird about this like sexual tension that they have in the movie when she's a human, not when she's an alien. Then it feels like a piece of the manipulation and a piece of the lustful nature that most of these characters have when they're taken over and infected. But to end the movie on a note where shy, nerdy, unassuming Miss Burke is like stalking Zeke and wants to fuck him while he's playing football in high school. I don't know. I say that, but if I was in Zeke's position out there playing football and I got Famke Janssen up in the stands giving fuck me eyes in my direction, I wouldn't hate it. But in all seriousness, the one thing about the faculty that I could have used a bit more of that I think would have made me love the film even more than I already do is I wish we got a bit more time with the actual faculty characters. I feel like Coach Willis, Robert Patrick's character, is the only one that really stands out among them. They all get their one scene. They all get their one moment to shine. You've got, of course, Miss Olsen in the opening of the film where she's like in this trance and stabs Principal Drake with the scissors. You've got Principal Drake getting not only that scene, but the one where she confronts the kids in the hallway and the one where she confronts them in the gym. You got Jon Stewart's character of Furlong and his attack scene. That's one of the big like centerpiece sequences of the film. Nurse Harper, Salma Hayek, is basically just here because it's a Robert Rodriguez film. She gets attacked and that's about it. But I don't know, for them being such cool individual villains, it feels like we're kind of just relegated to it being this villainous infection force. Like it's like this entire hive mind type enemy, which works very well. But I wish we got more individuality, a little bit more oomph out of all of our main faculty characters, at least in the first half of the film. I think that's honestly just a casualty of the number of characters that we have. We have a lot of our faculty characters, but we have even more of our high school protagonist characters that we're trying to invest everybody in and get you to really root for them and not want any of them to be turned or infected or, you know, be corrupted into this alien. So maybe it would have been a bit of a drag. Maybe it ultimately was left on the cutting room floor and was ultimately the best decision for the movie. I'm really not sure, but I like these characters so much that I always find myself wanting just a little bit more of them. Overall, guys, as I've said ad nauseum at this point, this is one of my favorite horror films of all time. This is something that came out right when I was the perfect age, 8 years old, loving horror, trying to seek out everything old, new, and in between. And I love the characters. I think the meta nature of it ages perfectly. And if I'm being honest, as far as all of the really popular Kevin Williamson projects in the 90s, even that big one, Scream, this one's my personal favorite. This is the one that has stuck with me the most. This is the one that I loved the most initially. And this is the one that I still constantly will carry the flag for and talk about how fucking awesome it is till the day that I die. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. I'm also going to put my review of The Gate up here, which I did a couple of days ago. A really nice gateway horror film that you should check out from the 80s. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.